Welcome back, everybody. So as you've seen in the last video, Casper finally got to hit Shadyside Dragway. That's pretty much my home track. I've been going there since I was 14 years old. Even though we only got to make 2 passes, got to hang out with really good friends, Micah and Joseph. I couldn't do this racing stuff without Micah. I mean, we're like a good team. I mean, he goes to the track with Blue in the wagon, and I help him, and he helps me a ton. And as you see, I'm sporting the Gaston Automotive Services hat here. That is actually Micah's shop over in Dallas, North Carolina. So if you live pretty local in Gaston County and you need some car work done, hit him up because he's really good. But to see John Wilburn, Colleen Tebow, Damien, Ken Hines, I mean, it was just really awesome to see fans of the channel drive all the way to Shadyside to hang out and see this thing go down the track for the first time. So you might be asking the purpose of this video, right? You may be asking, well, Andy, what did you learn in 2 passes down the track? You would be surprised. You know, had that first good lick where we run a 689 at 99 miles an hour. And I'll put another picture of the time slip in so you can see it. And then the second run was just horrible. I mean, it bogged off the line, run like a 780 something, but it did go 98.8 miles an hour, I think. So, yeah, I learned a lot from that pass as well, because I learned that something is wrong with mix-up balls. So let's talk about it. So in the last video, when we were at the track, I told you that I pulled the plugs out because I said that it acted like it was loading up on the starting line. And when I got back to the pits, I pulled the plugs out. And this is not representative of that, but yeah, you can see how lean these plugs are. Now, when I pulled them out at the track, they looked almost exactly the same. These plugs have been driven on 600 miles, and I drove it home with that, and that's the color we have. I don't think it's a carburetor issue. I think if you will go back to my last dyno video of where Dennis did some trimming of silicone, and I said, don't be this guy, guess what? I strike again. You remember that dyno video? I talked about how I stayed up till 3 o'clock in the morning all night long getting this engine ready to go to the dyno, and had to use silicone on the intake gaskets, or RTV. It's not silicone. I used RTV Right Stuff. I really like that stuff. It works good. No pun intended on that, but anyways, when I torqued the intake down, it actually put a little bit inside the intake runners that Dennis went in there and trimmed out. And we went and gained like 16 horsepower at the last minute, pushing us over the 700 horsepower mark to 708. But I think what happened after that first pass at Shadyside, another problem developed. I think this thing has a vacuum leak on the intake manifold, and let me show you what I got going on here. So as you know, this is called mixed up balls for good reason. Got these Boss 429 style Hemi heads on a Boss 351 block, Ford racing block, and a Cleveland tunnel ram. Quite the combination, right? So this is actually the gasket that I used that night. And it's a pretty standard deal. 1262 S3 gasket. And so I put RTV or Right Stuff around here trying to seal that up to the Cleveland manifold, which I actually put epoxy in the runners themselves to size them down. But here, let me show you something. When you take this gasket here, well, let me put it the opposite. You can see the huge difference between a Cleveland 4V runner and a Windsor. There is no comparison. But when you line these gaskets up, right, this is where the problem becomes. The edge of this top right here is matching up with that part on the intake. So what I think is happening, I think we're getting a vacuum leak on the top of the intake runners. And I actually confirmed this. I don't believe it, I know it, because it's cold and raining here now, or I would show it. But I sprayed brake clean on down this rail here on both sides when it was idling, and the engine idled up, which told me that it's sucking it in and causing the issue. Another clue that I seen once I got home, you see the nice color of the headers there? Yeah, looks good. You get over here, purple tint, which means that this pipe is getting really hot in relation to the others. So actually it was leaking back there between 6 and 7 on this side over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this intake off, pull the distributor out, reseal everything up, relash the valves, since I've got 600 miles on the engine now, and drain the oil, change the oil, just go over the engine, make sure that everything is good. And I always do this when I go to the track. I'm actually going to pull compression on each cylinder to make sure that it's healthy, because I know what readings I got on the engine dyno, 185 psi on every cylinder. So that will give me a good indication of what's going on with the engine. So let's get back to talking about what I learned in those 2 runs. Believe it or not, in this world of technology, with EFI cars, you can data log everything under the sun. But if you have something archaic like this and trying to keep it that way, there's other ways to data log. And yes, I'm talking to it. It's called using a GoPro camera. So what I did, or what I do, this is something that I've been doing for years, even before I started YouTube, is use this camera as a means to tell a story as to what's going on. So starting out, I'm going to insert some footage here for you to see. I can go and look at the rear tires and see how the tire is actually working, see if it's slipping, see how much air pressure I need in the rear tires. And you can tell by as the tire wrinkles as to whether it needs more air pressure or less air pressure. So in this case here, the tire is working extremely well. It's wrinkling up, but it's not rolling over on top of itself, which is a good thing. You can see the separation of the rear end and the front of the bed as the truck rises. You can see the front end travel, see how much travel it has. You can actually see that it actually picked the front tires up, or the front left tire anyway, on that one run. So that's one aspect that you can use the GoPro to tell a story. Second thing is, one of the concerns that I had with this engine and the C4 is I'm still running the torque converter that I had behind the 393. I thought that this torque converter would blow, the engine would just blow through it because it's making so much more power than the 393 was. But with that being said, using the GoPro, I was able to, one, look and see just how high the converter flashed on the launch of the run. Then I could go through and see how much drop I had in RPMs on each shift. And then at the top end of the track, I could see what my end or finish line RPM is to calculate the amount of slippage that I'm getting with the converter. And you may think, well, why is all this important? Well, let me tell you. to a converter guy, making sure that you get exactly what you need for your combination, this type of information is pretty invaluable. I mean, I've done talked to Harold at Dynamic Racing Transmissions about the TCT converter. That's his line of converters. And we're coming up with a game plan on this converter here as to what we need to do. Now, we're not going to make our decisions off of this one run, obviously, because I left the starting line in Casper right off of idle. I didn't even bring it up on RPMs, and it went a 155 60 foot, and that tells me that there's a lot left on the table for the given ET that it ran. So if we can get that down into the 140s and get the 330 time down, I do believe that this truck will fall somewhere in the 670 range when it's all said and done and it's sorted out. Carburetors are tuned, ignition's tuned. So yeah, there's a lot of things that we can do. And using this GoPro, I'm telling you, tells you the story. One last thing before I let you go. You know, this thing was dyno tuned over at the Race Engine Challenge dyno over in Charlotte, North Carolina. And we dialed in the air-fuel ratio at perfect. As close as we could get it on the dyno, made killer power. Now, you would think that with us getting the jetting set perfectly on the dyno that would translate into the track. No. This is one thing where running an engine on the dyno and running in real life, you have to do your homework and you still have work to do because you're running an engine in a static situation on the dyno. There's no airflow coming across the carburetors, which can change how the fuel is metered in the carburetor. So when you put this in a dynamic situation, such as running down the track, you have acceleration forces, you have different, maybe slight differences in fuel pressure on the launch. Hopefully you got a good regulator and pump that can compensate for that. And then, like I said about the airflow across the carburetors and the pressure differential can change the jetting requirements by a huge amount. So if you go get your engine dynoed and you come up with the perfect jetting settings, don't think that it's going to work perfect at the track. You're still going to have to do your homework. Now, if it was an EFI setting, it's going to do what it's commanded to do, and you're not necessarily going to have those issues unless you have a throttle body that's open at the top and you still have the air coming across it. You may have different amount of air going in if you're commanding a certain amount of fuel, but that's a whole nother subject. So I'm pretty excited about this thing running a 680 pass on its first outing. I'm going to pull the distributor out, even though I probably don't have to, but I'm wanting to clean all this up. Check out the distributor gear, make sure it's happy, and yeah, I think that's about it. I got to get to work. And we have some really exciting things coming up for the month of March. For those that have been following along, Uncle Tony and myself have got a tentative date set for our race. It's loose right now. More will be revealed on that. And I'm taking a field trip for the channel to bring you something that's really cool, something that's near and dear to my heart. So I can't wait for y'all to see that. So stick around, stay tuned, and until next time, this is Andy from Unity Motorsports Garage. I'll catch you later.